Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was Trained by Batman movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. The representation of Gotham's darkness, the pillar that maintains the glimmer of hope in a dark city, filled with evil. The knight succumbed to his wounds, dying at the hands of old, dark enemies who kept Gotham under their control, filling the city with a cold sadness, a sinister darkness. Barbara looked at him. She looked into those bright sapphire eyes. Bruce trained someone to replace him. Bruce trained the new Batman. Chapter 1. Gotham City had grown darker, colder with each passing day. The rain had decided to continue falling on the city that week, making it darker, colder than it had been before. Gotham was always a dark city, a cold city, a city drenched in rain and accompanied by dark clouds. But since Bruce Wayne's death and Batman's disappearance, Gotham seemed to have decided to become darker, to retreat into its own constant misery and coldness. The week before Gotham City became as cold and dark as death itself, Bruce Wayne had worked tirelessly with Wayne Industries and his adopted children on a major new project that would help the city's slums. Shortly after the CEO broke the news, a few days later, an explosion at Wayne Industries resulted in the death of the last of the Waynes and the disappearance of Batman from the face of the earth. Gotham was always dark until the appearance of the Dark Knight of Gotham. The fearful people saw him as a dark representation of justice and hope. The police saw him as a partner, someone they could tolerate after several clashes between them. However, that small hope that had existed for years had only vanished after the explosion, leaving them unprotected, without that small light that had remained steadfast for years in the face of various adversities. The Gotham Police Department, GPD, had launched an investigation and worked tirelessly throughout that week, for 7 full days, just to get a tiny clue about the culprit who had brought about the death of one of the city's most beloved men. They found nothing. James Jim Gordon was appointed commissioner of the Gotham Police Department, placing all resources at his disposal and serving as the department's public face in any meetings held with the mayor or other relevant authorities. The man worked with Batman for years and knew Bruce Wayne intimately. Jim himself took charge of the investigation, relegating the officers to lead other important operations, while he, along with his partner Harvey Bullock, investigated the case that shook the city to the point of making it even darker than it already was. There were several criminals within the walls of Blackgate who could have carried the death of Bruce Wayne on their shoulders. The method used was a bomb planted in his desk, with others placed within the walls of the same office. These bombs were activated once Wayne entered the office, killing him instantly and taking Lucius Fox, his current partner, with them. That modus operandi ruled out assassins like Deadshot, who preferred to kill his targets by shooting them, or the Joker, who preferred to make a big deal out of Wayne's death to lure Batman to the scene, and focused on guys like Black Mask, who would spare no expense to kill his target. But they found nothing linking Black Mask to Bruce Wayne's death or Batman's disappearance. They were completely in the dark, lacking the necessary information or adequate leads. While some inmates could be the culprits, there was nothing tying them to the crime, or they had a solid alibi, as many of them were still in prison or Arkham Asylum, making it impossible for them to have orchestrated the murder. Another method of eliminating suspects was precisely the signature of the murder. Joker and Deadshot had their peculiar signature when carrying out a murder, and people like Bane weren't exactly the most stealthy when carrying out a murder, and someone could see it, as he enjoyed finishing off his target with his own hands. The attack and murder were carried out by a conscientious, trained, and meticulous individual. He hadn't left a single clue, not a single strand of hair or a partial fingerprint. Even when they tried to search the explosives, they found nothing that could lead them to the perpetrator of either death. It was as if the murder itself had been carried out by a ghost. Jim was frustrated at being at a dead end. He couldn't see any way to pursue the case after 7 intense days of work, and it was noticeable on his face, with its enormous dark circles under his eyes, his face paler and thinner due to poor diet and lack of sleep. This was something his daughter pointed out the last time she saw him, and it caused concern among his colleagues. But Jim Gordon wasn't the only one who had been searching for Wayne's killer for 7 days, almost 24 hours a day. Batman's colleagues, those known in Gotham for their work with the Bat, gathered in the Batcave, the headquarters of Batman and his team, with the intention of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together and finding the most wanted criminal in Gotham today. Gotham was dark and cold, enveloping criminals in cloaks, obscuring their faces and their very presence. Batman's teammates, along with Harvey and Commissioner Gordon, worked hard without finding anything about Bruce Wayne's killer. It was as if any trace had vanished like smoke, as if he had never existed, and as if the attack at Wayne Industries had never happened. It was the first time Batman's friends were without leads, without a path to follow. Usually, the Dark Knight would have taken the reins, followed the clues, and found the culprit after much sweat and, probably, blood. But even in the shadowy underworld of Gotham, they knew nothing about the murder or the vigilante's disappearance. With no leads or suspects, the investigation came to a standstill. That was until a few hours ago. With Bruce Wayne's death and the burial of his cold body in the family crypt, Wayne Industries was up for sale to anyone who wanted to buy it, having been set aside in the will Bruce signed years earlier, which left explicit instructions. The will could not be opened until 3 months after his death, and the family business was put up for sale, denying the possibility of any of his pupils or friends obtaining it. Not even the late Lucius Fox could have opted to buy the company. The foreigner, a man with a Japanese name and European features, was the one who ended up as CEO of Wayne Industries, taking the majority of the shares and controlling the company with 60% of them, leaving aside anyone who might have tried to remove him by force. It wasn't unusual for a foreigner to take control of a local company. That had happened before, with other large corporations. The strange thing about the purchase was that the current owner and CEO kept the Wayne Industries name completely intact, unchanged, allowing the Wayne name to remain present as a beacon of innovation and improvement for Gotham. He even kept Bruce Wayne's plans on the table without abandoning any of them, continuing with the man's previous projects. But that wasn't all that was strange. The man was barely 23 years old, an orphan, and the information about him on various websites didn't indicate where he obtained the fortune he used to acquire the company. He didn't seem to have been adopted by anyone with money, and not much was known about him other than a few small investments that seemed to have provided him with the necessary funds. And according to the young man, he had acquired Wayne Industries, seeing it as an opportunity to make something big in the world, following a promise and a goal of his own. These words aroused the suspicion of Barbara Gordon, daughter of Commissioner Jim Gordon and former pupil of Bruce Wayne, and she could not help but link the current owner of Wayne Industries with the attack on the main offices that took the lives of Lucius Fox and Bruce Wayne. A mere suspicion about the current CEO was enough for Barbara, and she spent the last few hours investigating the new owner of Wayne Industries. As she anticipated, she didn't find much relevant information. He was from Japan, born on October 10th, and had a reputation among young entrepreneurs his age, being a respected figure in his home country. Barbara investigated anyone with the surname Uzumaki, looking for any connection to the League of Shadows or any group linked to Eastern culture. But no matter how hard she looked, that surname didn't appear among the names of the League or allies of Deathstroke, another man on the girl's list. She grew frustrated after 48 hours of research, banging her forehead on the table. She'd been in the bell tower for the last 2 days, in front of the monitors with all the information about the owner of Wayne Industries flashing on each one, with a photograph and the files present. Due to a restructuring at Wayne Industries following the takeover, employees hadn't been back in 2 days, leaving Barbara without her internship. And if you add in the week following Bruce's death, she hadn't been paying much attention to her work for 9 days, something Bruce would have allowed, but the new CEO. She'd also been investigating him, digging up every sliver of dirt on the man, looking for any weakness or avenue she could take. Hey Babs. You're going to ruin your eyes on this. Shouldn't you be getting some rest? How much sleep have you had in the last 9 days? You're following too closely in your father's footsteps. Richard John Dick Grayson had been Bruce Wayne's first ward, his first adopted son after the death of his biological parents. Like Barbara, Dick had been working the last few days in Gotham, looking for information about his father figure's death, putting his job as a Bloodhaven police officer aside for a while, until he could get the matters of Bruce and his death completely under control. I'm not too tired, well, just a little tired. She had removed her glasses and was rubbing her green eyes, which showed the fatigue that was overtaking her and that she couldn't stay awake much longer. The fatigue was taking its toll on her, and a few hours of rest would do her good. A little. Dick laughed briefly, setting a cup of coffee on the table. It's already 8 in the morning, exactly 8 minutes past 2. You've been going for 3 days without sleep, 10 days working on the whole Bruce thing. There wasn't a trace of it an hour ago, there won't be now. Besides, Tim would give me a piece of his mind if I left you working again for a 4th day without sleep. And the coffee? I have a meeting with your father. Jim and my boss want me to be a kind of liaison between the 2 police offices. Apparently, a group of criminals is trafficking weapons from one city to the other. The odds of a mafia family being behind it were simply too high. Gotham was on the other side of the spectrum, and whenever the Dark City was embroiled in criminal activity, its known criminals would be reaching out to take something Bloodhaven had that they wanted. And that was exactly what Dick was looking for, while also dealing with Bruce's death and Barbara's overwork. So. Yes, you'll have me here for a while. I can't leave Bruce's business alone, but I can't put my work aside either. Alfred has my old room ready for a long time. Good to know. Tim doesn't have much time to help me because of school and Jason. Jason is Jason, Dick squeezed Barbara's shoulder. He does things his way. Now, for Tim and Jason to help with the job, we'll have to find a way to get what we're looking for. And that's precisely what we haven't been able to achieve, neither with our alter egos nor with Jim's help. Not even your computer skills have been able to turn up anything, not even on this Naruto Uzumaki, he doesn't have Asian features. The image of the new owner of Wayne Industries showed a young man with unruly hair, an intense golden blonde color, and two enormous blue eyes that resembled two brilliant sapphires, which seemed to shine even more with a smile plastered across his face. There were no imperfections on that sharp, warm, and kind face. Those marks are strange, don't you think? Barbara pointed at the scars on the businessman's face, frowning. Throughout her investigation, she found nothing related to those marks, those scars that resembled cat whiskers. Why did he have them? Was it an accident or were they just from birth? She had read everything about Naruto Uzumaki, and there was no news report that indicated any accident that had left any marks. Cuts, maybe. I was serious about you needing to sleep, Babs. A little rest will clear the blockage in that mind. Stretching his arm, Dick turned off the main monitor. Don't growl or snarl like a dog. It's time to rest. Wayne Industries. 10 days after Bruce Wayne's death, the family business passed into the hands of an unknown person, something that generated a strange feeling in those who had been by Bruce's side, since the will could not yet be opened, and the company did not pass directly to Alfred, the man who was always by the deceased side. Alfred Pennyworth was the Wayne family's most loyal employee, working alongside Bruce's parents and taking in young Wayne when they were both murdered. Given their history and ties, Bruce's charges found it odd that the company hadn't been left in the butler's hands. Even stranger, Alfred didn't seem concerned about the change in ownership or the fact that Bruce hadn't given it to him. This left several loose ends, many ramifications that anyone could follow. Alfred likely knew the contents of the will, and also the reason for the wait between Bruce's death and the opening of it, which had been too long from one point to the next, leaving yet another mystery to grapple with. There were too many loose ends. The strange deaths of Bruce and Lucius, the strange case with the Wayne inheritance, and the purchase of Wayne Industries by a complete opportunist, as if he'd been tipped off about the death of the last Wayne and knew the entire contents of Bruce's will. Added to that was the strange drug trafficking case that had begun the same day the new CEO and owner took over the company, 9 days after Bruce's death and Batman's disappearance. Jim Gordon wasn't a man to give up hope, not with so many loose ends and rising crime on Gotham streets at the same time they were investigating 2 murders. As Gotham's commissioner, Jim had a duty to the city, a duty that made it impossible for him to back down. And that was why he was back on the rooftop, shining the Batman symbol directly into the sky, thanks to the enormous spotlight they used on Batman calls. He was soaked, his red hair plastered to his forehead, and the cigarette between his rough fingers was completely soaked, making it impossible to light, no matter how hard he tried. But he tried again a couple more times, just like when he turned on the bat signal that night, ready to see if Batman would show up or not. If he did, all the unknowns would be answered. If he didn't, he should probably give up, although Jim wasn't that kind of man. The cold, damp night wind stirred the commissioner's soaked hat, forcing the man to squeeze his eyes shut for several seconds before opening them and widening them slightly. A dark upright figure stood in front of the enormous spotlight, casting a dark shadow that hid the light from Jim's flickering eyes. The Batman. The voice came out as a mere, barely audible whisper. A second later, thunder roared behind the figure, and Jim could see the differences between the Batman before Bruce Wayne's death and the one before him 11 and 13 days later, standing tall, shrouded in shadow. It was only for a split second, but the Gotham commissioner could see the blazing blue eyes staring back at him from beneath the mask. It's not his eyes. Black eyes, a more muscular body. After so many years collaborating with Batman, Jim Gordon knew him perfectly, and this wasn't the Batman he knew, the one who had saved Gotham so many times. Silence was the answer Jim needed. I know you're not Batman, the man adjusted his hat. His feet felt soaked. The trench coat was heavy, making it difficult to keep his arm over his headgear. But you're all Gotham has right now. Jim watched as the shadow stood up to its full height. He was slightly shorter than the original Batman, with a slimmer, less muscular body. His eyes weren't black but blue, and his skin was tanned. He recorded that image in his own mind for the future, to differentiate. But even Batman spoke more. The cigarette fell to the floor, completely soaked. Even so, Jim Gordon stamped on it with his right foot. Perhaps an investigation would even be too much work for the department. Gotham needs you, Batman or not. There were still allies of the original Batman in Gotham, but this didn't stop the criminals. While Batman was a dark, intimidating figure, the Bat's companions were the light that kept him sane during confrontations and carnage that would have left any human in a deranged, insane state. As the light, the Vigilante's companions were being overlooked by the Bat's enemies, and Jim knew it. They needed a dark night to keep the peace, to stop the coming war. Jim Gordon, a chill ran down the commissioner's spine as his name emerged from the shadowy figure. Now that I'm back, we'll be working on Bruce Wayne's murder, arms trafficking, and the current security issues at Blackgate. Blackgate Prison had allowed some of its inmates to escape in that last week, all of whom were enemies, in some way, of Batman. Everything was ready to explode again in Gotham. Chapter 2. The news was flooded with the appearance of the new owner of Wayne Industries. Newspaper front pages featured his face, the huge smile plastered across his face as he greeted the media at his first corporate press conference in Gotham, leading the city's largest and most important company. The new CEO and investor appeared jovial, cheerful, and charismatic in front of reporters, always smiling and ignoring the poisonous comments the same journalists hurled at him, trying to elicit a negative reaction from the man. The new owner of Wayne Industries proved skillful with words. He dodged every one of the poisonous questions that suggested he might be Bruce Wayne's killer in order to acquire the company, launching his career as a Gotham businessman and a potential mob leader, yet another who had arrived in Gotham after Batman's disappearance. The Dark Knight had been the dark light that illuminated the people of Gotham, a small hope for a better Gotham, without gang wars in the streets, without open clashes between the mafia in every corner, eager to take over the city. Without the vigilantes' presence, even if it had been for a week, it had opened the way for criminals to flood the city, for the major mafias to settle in Gotham, and once again rule the underworld. Both events, the acquisition of Wayne Industries and the ever-rising crime rates, had been a turning point for Gotham. The city had never been considered the safest in the city. But Batman's presence over the past few years and the constant work toward change by Wayne Industries, the Gotham Police Department, and the vigilante himself, had left the city in the best possible state. A state that now, in just a week, had been reduced to ashes. Leaving no trace of the changes the city's inhabitants had enjoyed in recent years. Another piece of news that flooded the streets was the police department's refusal to continue the search for the Dark Knight. For 2 days, the bat signal had stopped illuminating the dark Gotham sky without explanation until a press conference by Jim Gordon, commissioner of the Gotham Police Department, who stated that their search for Batman had been a failure over the past few days and that they couldn't rely on him constantly. When the vigilante returned, however, they would work together to solve the various problems plaguing the city. The crisis only worsened after Jim Gordon's announcement, signaling criminals to fill the streets with their presence, terrorizing Gotham's residents, reaching a point of decline for the city. Various mobsters and major criminals saw an opportunity in the vigilante's disappearance. Fear spread and people returned to their original point. A Gotham without Batman, afraid to go out into the city's dark streets for fear of being robbed or killed. This increased the workload on the police department and forced the mayor to increase the resources of his police force, flooding the streets with police cars and vans in an attempt to maintain an image of security. People, however, did not believe in the false sense of security promoted by the new mayor. A mayor who seemed more interested in his own pocketbook than in keeping the citizens safe. Commissioner Gordon was the main driving force behind the changes in his department and the main culprit behind the increased police presence on the streets. This wasn't something the residents viewed negatively, but they were realistic. The police could be corrupted, and as much as Jim was a man of complete integrity, the department itself was filled with people working for one of the major crime families who had recently reappeared in the city to take a slice of the pie. Currently, after 19 days without the presence of Batman and after the death of Bruce Wayne, the city was at a point that criminals called the golden age of crime, or that was what the young criminals who began to appear mentioned when getting drunk in the usual bars exclusive to criminals, to mobsters. One of those young mobsters turned out to be Carmine Falcone's eldest son, Mario Falcone. The son of the late mobster had recently taken his father's place at the helm of the new Falcone family, reorganizing the family with those loyal to his father and aiming for the position of mob leader of all of Gotham City, a crime boss. Mario and his inner circle began to manipulate his father's old network of contacts, forming allies with smaller mafia groups and allying themselves with the Chinese triad to fully operate over Gotham's ports, forming a solid foundation for the Falcone family's growth as a major crime family, climbing the ranks while the rest of the families were still reorganizing. This was due to Mario's business skills, securing contracts with the Chinese triad and other small and medium-sized businessmen so as not to draw attention to himself, as he hoped that by the end of the month, and without Batman's presence, the Falcones would occupy the top spot among the most influential and powerful mafia families. They controlled Gotham's ports, cutting off any access to shipments to other families. And had solidified their position by having the financial support of the triad, who benefited by setting up a network within the cold city of Gotham. Because of this, Mario found his peak as the golden age of crime and mentioned it to other young mobsters in his hangouts, where other young people supported Marito's phrase, creating a false sense of security for small-time mobsters starting out in the underworld, resulting in an insult to those who had been operating in the underworld for years. The Gotham police couldn't touch Mario. With his connections, network and allies, during the dawn of Gotham's new Dark Age, he remained untouchable by absorbing other small-time mob families, expanding his network of connections within the police force, and augmenting his forces with intelligence and security, hoping to bring his empire to the same level as his father, the late Carmine Falcone, who was a prominent mobster until his death. And Mario wanted to surpass his father. Young Falcone was in his office on the top floor of the building that served as a front for a fictitious real estate company he ran with his men, giving a false sense of legitimacy that was tarnished by his last name. Falcone. Perhaps the young could be fooled, but the older men who had been in Gotham for years were perfectly familiar with the name that belonged to Carmine Falcone, the most prominent criminal of the age. Mario had recently managed to establish a small alliance with the Moroni family, establishing a peace treaty between the two families that was too lucrative for both sides, giving both sides substantial profits. Mario saw the Marinus as an opportunity, an ally. Salvatore Moroni had been his father Carmine's enemy and the one responsible for the Falcones' failure to grow as they should have after the family's decline. However, Mario wasn't willing to follow in his father's footsteps and allow past grudges to guide his decisions. He was determined to fully grow, to lead the new Falcones back to the glory they once enjoyed. The loud noise halted Mario's movements. He was in front of his laptop, reviewing the latest data, comparing it with the growth the family had experienced under his father's leadership in the past. That same data was a reflection of Mario's management, his performance as a negotiator, and his alliance with the Triad, the Marinus, and other business and mob groups. Is anyone there? He slowly opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a gleaming Colt that showed how well maintained it was. The stock was adorned with a huge F&M, referencing its owner's name. The ivory carving was flawless, and the slight nicks in the metal, reminiscent of a thorn bush, only added an exotic touch to the Falcone family's signature weapon. Burrito left his post behind his massive ebony desk and walked toward the door with slow, silent steps, trying not to alert whoever was on the other side. An assassin could have been sent by one of the other families or even their allies, but Mario didn't believe an assassin would make noise to be discovered. Perhaps it had been a sudden movement by his guards. He slowly moved his hand toward the doorknob. It was at that moment that both doors opened and knocked him off his feet, causing him to lose control of his revolver and it to fly out of his hand. But what? Imposing, dark, with icy eyes, a figure Mario recognized loomed over him. Behind this shadowy figure, a trail of his downed guards marked the path by which he had come to him, by which he had reached the door. Small drops of blood stained the figure's dark gloves, dripping to the floor. Mario Falcone swallowed, feeling it as if it were a huge stone. After almost a month without any sign of her, he had before him one of Gotham's most important figures, the one who would bring light back to the Dark City while hiding in the shadows. That man. What is the Dark Knight doing in the office of a nobleman like me? Has he eliminated my employees? That will definitely look bad. I'm just a real estate developer. Why would a real estate developer have so many guards then? A folder fell between Mario's legs. The man's eyes widened and a cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. The Falcone family was buried with the death of Carmine Falcone at the hands of the Hanged Man. However, your father's former allies have begun to stir, and it's strange that you've been seeing Moroni and a Triad representative in recent days. Photographs, contracts, and a huge list of names. Mario Falcone had been exposed, along with all the people he was paying behind the scenes, people he bribed to obtain permits, people he blackmailed to eliminate rivals. Along with this list was a bank statement with transactions associated with a shell company to which Mario sent money through other transactions, both legal and illegal, to cover up the transfer, all without directly targeting him. Technology hasn't stopped growing. The IP address someone logged in from points directly to this office. And if I align all the transactions and data, it points to dealings I shouldn't have, Mario Falcone. His eyes shifted to the Colt. Were you hoping to use it against someone? Since his meeting with Jim Gordon on the rooftop, the new Batman had dedicated his entire time to uncovering one of the new players who had tried to establish themselves. Mario Falcone, the eldest son of Carmine Falcone and brother of Sofia and Alberto Falcone. It was something Batman predicted when Jim told him about the underworld. Someone like Mario, son of the late Carmine, would be too willing to take control and rebuild the Falcone family under his command. Following that line of thought, the new Batman investigated all of Mario's movements, all the people he had met in those 20 days, and all the bank transactions associated with any account he had been in contact with. He could have become a full-fledged mobster if he hadn't made the simple mistake of using a team assigned to that office to issue the initial money transactions. Falcone could blame an employee, a manager, but it's precisely his team that made the moves. Someone wants him to eliminate Falcone. Everything was set for Mario Falcone's downfall, and it was all too easy to uncover. If anyone had actually tried, Mario wouldn't have started building his short-lived empire in the first place. Someone's playing. Another player. The new Batman had already established the hypothesis of another player. He had no current allies and hadn't even contacted the old Batman's allies. But someone had led him to Mario Falcone, and he had only toppled him like a domino, causing other pieces to fall slowly but surely. Falcone's fall would mean the fall of his allies and the complete disappearance of an empire that could have changed the balance. Wayne Industries. CEO's office. The office that had once belonged to Lucius Fox had remained unchanged since the purchase of Wayne Industries. The company's current owner hadn't remodeled the office, leaving the essence of Fox and Wayne in it, sending the personal effects to the deceased man's children, who happened to be Bruce's best friend before his death. But the man had made a modification, or rather, improved one already made by Bruce Wayne. Behind a cuckoo clock, he improved the secret room that the last of the Waynes used to store the Batman suits, the ones he would use in critical moments or when Wayne Industries was attacked and the vigilante had to make his exit to stop any potential problems. When the blonde man left that room, he did so wearing a black Armani suit with a white t-shirt under the jacket and a black tie hanging from his neck, giving the image of a powerful man who had the power of a company constantly supporting him. Anyone who knew Bruce Wayne could see a counterpart in the new CEO of Wayne Industries. They both wore the same style of suit when representing the company, they both maintained similar alter egos. Bruce had been Batman and Naruto hadn't yet established himself as one, but he did wear his suit and they both seemed to be genuinely intelligent. Over the years, Bruce had brought downfall to more than one of Gotham City's crime families and villains, bringing a sliver of hope when he hid his face in the Dark Knight suit. Recently, Naruto had eliminated Mario Falcone, thus eliminating a potential enemy that would be difficult to eliminate in the future, although it had been thanks to an unexpected ally that the man hadn't met yet. Naruto tugged at his tie, untying it and letting out a light sigh as the pressure that had been slightly strangling his neck eased. He'd never been a suit man, and you could really tell when he started to feel uncomfortable. I hope the night was peaceful for you, Mr. Naruto. In the Wayne Industries office belonging to the CEO stood a man wearing a suit characteristic of Butler's, his mustache showing white streaks due to age and with slight wrinkles caused by his years of worry. Someone's been leading me to Falcone. I don't know who yet, but the information incriminating Mario Falcone and Salvador Maroni, along with the Chinese triad, came from a computer in his office, his own computer. Naruto doubted Falcone would have been idiotic enough to send the data himself, both the payments and the other extra data that appeared in front of him, and what made him investigate Carmine's son in the first place. Could you think about the Marinus? No. Salvador had welcomed Mario as his bedmate. The tie was placed on the table. Slowly, he unbuttoned the top button and freed his collar. Someone else is playing, and he could end up completely burned. Mr. Bruce had similar problems. Gotham criminals, they're peculiar. Alfred Pennyworth came into full view as he stood up straight, placing a cup of Americano coffee next to the new Wayne Industries CEO's laptop. Thank you, Alfred. It only takes a lump of sugar, as he likes. Alfred served the Wayne family for years, decades. He first served as Bruce's parents' butler and later became the guardian of the last of the Waynes when his parents died, becoming the pillar of a paranoid man, filled with demons trying to devour him from within his mind. Do you still not want to reveal everything? Alfred's words were an indication of a plan that had been hatched for years before the death of Bruce Wayne, his previous employer. A plan whose full outlines, to date, were only known to Alfred and Naruto only knew the party himself had to work on. No. Until Bruce's will is read on March 17th, I want to keep everything else secret. I think it's essential to tracking down Bruce's killer, the person behind all this chaos. Jim Gordon had hidden the return of the Dark Knight, the vigilante who terrorized Gotham's criminals with his mere presence, the hero the Dark City needed. Alfred hid Bruce's plan from the rest of his companions, his protection of Gotham from the possible problems that Batman's disappearance would cause. I understand. The night was clear, as if the moon needed to bear witness to that secret conversation. Alfred must have been the new owner of Wayne Industries, or failing that, one of Bruce's wards. But the entire company was in the hands of the man sitting across from Lucius Fox's old desk. If you don't need anything else, I'll be back at the mansion. Alfred was a member of a British Army Special Forces Corps, possessing the mentality and strength necessary to display fortitude. However, even though it had been almost a month since Bruce's death, the pain plagued him in the dark solitude. Alfred, the blonde's hand stopped his movements. Together we will find the killer. I swear. Chapter 3. A month after Bruce Wayne's death, the rain hadn't stopped in Gotham City. The city had always been cold and damp, with rain being an important part of the city and its inhabitants. But since the death of the last of the Waynes, it seemed to have decided to be present every night in the city, not a single one left untouched by its presence. The asphalt was always damp, and water trickled down the sloping roofs of some of the city's oldest buildings, forming small rills. This rain wasn't torrential, it wasn't a storm. The drops fell gently, slowly, signaling to the people that they were there, that they were still present, and that they wouldn't be leaving the city for a while. The new mafia family led by Mario Falcone had been put behind bars by Commissioner Gordon. He and his men arrested Falcone's defeated guards and the terrified Mario in their building, with all the evidence on the table, with all the dirty deals pointing directly at the man. One of the newest players had fallen at the very beginning of the game, and this created a ripple effect. The rest of the mafia families did everything they could to move, to take Falcone's territory and contracts for themselves, and to rise as the great mafiosi they hoped to be. The battles for control of Falcone's areas began once the front page of the newspaper showed the man being subdued by the police, starting a gang war for control of everything that belonged to Mario. But young Falcone's allies were quicker. Salvador Moroni took what had belonged to Falcone and signed contracts with the Triad, taking control of the ports and restarting the movement of goods in and out of the city's ports. Gotham didn't improve with Falcone's arrest. The situation only worsened, generating constant clashes between police and members of the mafia, flooding the streets with blood, soaking the pavement with maroon red, masking the gray. Jim Gordon, as Gotham's commissioner, created a state of alarm in the city by imposing a curfew on citizens, which was supported by the new mayor. Both men attempted to protect the residents using their own methods. While Jim used the police force to try to mitigate the situation, the mayor lined his pockets with promises made to other people, powerful men and women in the city's high society, untouchable individuals who pulled the strings for their own benefit. Due to the restrictions caused by these promises, the budget invested in the police was cut in half, salaries were frozen, and the force was forced to use defective and outdated equipment, causing discontent among the police. Due to the situation, the Gotham Police Department had split into two groups. One led by high society and the city's mayor, and a smaller group led by Commissioner Gordon himself. This small group was made up of men who believed in true justice, those who would not be bribed by high society, and who would protect the citizens at all costs. The group led by Commissioner Gordon found itself between a rock and a hard place. Its members were beaten by the mob and hunted by their corrupt colleagues, those who orchestrated the robberies and ambushes that ended with officers injured and, in the worst cases, killed. Jim had tried to fix the police force. He tried for the first few years alongside Batman, slowly cleaning up the department. All his efforts seemed to have evaporated with that crisis, flooding the force with bad apples, with corrupt people who would do anything for a little money. Once again, the bat signal lit up Gotham's rainy night sky. Once again, Jim Gordon stood in the rain, a trembling, soaked half-smooth cigarette between his cold trembling lips. With his enormous trench coat soaked, his hat slightly obscuring his face, Gordon waited patiently for the vigilante to appear, the new Batman who had arrested the Falcone family, uncovering the corruption within the police department in the process, overwhelming the man with worry. Mario Falcone had been a tough nut to crack. Since Batman's disappearance, Falcone had put the police in a tight spot, and Jim could attest to that. The man was skilled at covering his tracks and had the funds to bribe the right people within the city. If that new Batman hadn't appeared, Mario probably would have taken over the city in less than a year, something Jim considered entirely probable. The young Falcone was currently occupying a cell in Blackgate with his inner circle. His two brothers and his main associates, thus completely dismantling the entire mafia family in the city, leaving their businesses protected from the vultures who were their adversaries. The light knock made Jim look up. Two figures were staring at him, soaked by the rain and dressed in their distinctive outfits. The figure on the right was a young teenager dressed in Robin's signature costume, its bright colors contrasting sharply with Batman's darker colors. The R was clearly visible on the boy's chest. The figure on the left was a young woman, wearing a form-fitting dress that made her feminine form more visible. The bat emblem was present on her chest, a yellow color that contrasted with her dark purple uniform. Her reddish hair cascaded over her short cape, and her green eyes were visible in the darkness. Jim hadn't seen those two for 30 days, since Batman's disappearance, although their presence only confirmed to him that the new Batman was not, for the moment, associated with the previous Batman's companions. He threw away the cigarette and stepped on it as he walked towards Robin and Batgirl, finding both of the Bat's companions a relief for the situation. Batman's companions had always supported the police department, and even now they continued to help the police officers on Jim Gordon's side to stop all those criminals who flooded the streets of Gotham, being an extra effort for all of them, who also had their lives as civilians. "Commissioner. It's a pleasure to see you again." Batgirl's eyes met the man's. The two stared at each other in silence for several seconds, which was broken by the commissioner when he sighed. "Batgirl." "Robin," the man's voice rasped in his throat. "I'm glad I can count on you too." "What's going on, Commissioner?" "What's not happening would be a better question, Robin." The rain had softened, forming light caresses on the three of their faces as the drops passed over them. "The situation within the department has become untenable. Fighting against the mob and their own colleagues is wearing my men down, tiring them to the point of exhaustion. Jim wasn't going to sugarcoat things. The Gotham Police Department was at a critical point that could lead to the demise of the entire force. Jim and Harvey had tried to expose all the corrupt cops, but just when they thought they'd found those people, they vanished from their radar. Police corruption. Gangs occupying the streets. Bruce Wayne's death. The change of CEO at Wayne Industries. Gotham is undergoing too many changes in such a short period of time. Dick had tried to stop her, but Batgirl was as stubborn as her own father and had continued investigating and working. It's as if someone wanted to change Gotham by force, as if a change were about to happen. The situation in Gotham was a puzzle with more and more pieces being added. The first was the death of Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox after revealing their plans to completely change Gotham City. The second was the war for control of the city, for the domination of the underworld by a single prominent figure. The third was the purchase of Wayne Industries by a completely unknown person, by a young man with no fortune, trying to take over a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the fourth was the corruption in Gotham, both within and outside the police force. All those pieces fit together inside Batgirl's mind. Or so she believed it might be. A giant puzzle they had to unravel in order to stop all the chaos rocking Gotham. I don't know if it will be a change or not, but the city can't endure any more problems. Commissioner. Blackgate. A report of unrest had recently come in inside the prison. Guards and inmates were engaged in a pitched battle for control of the prison, and in that confrontation the police were losing miserably, being outnumbered by all the inmates inside and by the deranged minds of many of the criminals locked up there. Jim had obtained that report after losing contact with the police officers who were taking Mario Falcone and his associates to prison. Mario was supposed to be in a cell for several years, but it wasn't surprising that someone would try to rescue him to get him out of that place. Especially when that man had millions of dollars in his pocket, enough to buy off judges and police officers inside and outside Blackgate Prison, a prison where Falcone could gain powerful allies. Letting out a sigh, Jim began to speak. I recently received a report. Blackgate is a battleground between the police and the police. The prison security system appears to have been hacked from the outside, and all the inmates are out of their cells, fighting the guards. Blackgate was one of Gotham's most prominent penal institutions, being the prison that prevented the escape of most criminals. Due to an earthquake that shook the city a few years prior, only a handful of inmates managed to escape from the place, being the only recorded escape from within the prison, maintaining its good name and image abroad, although Jim knew that Blackgate hid much more than met the eye. Another problem to add. Should we ask the League for help? Robin looked at Batgirl. She was the one in charge in Dick's absence, and he believed she could make the best decisions for a teenager about to graduate from high school. No. We can't add that to the equation, Robin. The Justice League featured the best and most powerful heroes in the entire world. Within their trinity, Batman had always been the brains while Superman and Wonder Woman were the brawn, the power against enemies. Bringing in League members could stop crime for just a few days, only to return stronger the next. Oh, well. We must tackle this at its root, Batgirl noted, elevating it to the top of the list of priorities. If we don't find the person orchestrating this, we won't be able to stop everything that's coming inside Gotham. Batgirl's mind had been working on the entire scheme since Bruce's death. It seemed like nothing was connected, but every single incident was directly or indirectly tied to Batman's disappearance from Gotham, as if that had been the main cog driving the current situation, as if everything revolved around Batman and his presence in Gotham, and they'd decided to remove him to carry out their plan. Batman was Gotham's vigilante, the figure who instilled fear among the city's criminals. Known as the Dark Knight, Batman operated under the cover of Gotham's darkness to wage war against crime and the entire underworld, leading many Blackgate criminals to be sent to prison by him. Despite all those criminals within those thick walls, none of them were close enough to Bruce Wayne to know he was Batman or that he used Wayne Industries to make all his tools. The closest thing to that might have been the leader of the League of Shadows, but Ra's al Ghul and his associates had largely stayed away from the city. Someone else knows that Batman was Bruce. Someone else is pulling the strings and executing his plan step by step without a very clear objective. Maybe control of Gotham or something else. The most important piece appeared in Batgirl's mind. The relationship between Batman and Bruce Wayne, which was much closer than the people of Gotham City could have imagined. And that was the piece that had been left out of the equation since Bruce's death, seemingly unimportant when it could be the most important thing, and the clue to finding the killer of Gotham's richest man, who also happened to be the one protecting the city. But the list of villains and criminals was too narrow. Catwoman and Ra's might be prime suspects, but the thief wouldn't be capable of murdering the man she loved, and the League leader wouldn't use a bomb to kill Bruce. Instead, he would fight Batman directly, using all his abilities to his fullest potential. We'll investigate what happened at Blackgate. Batgirl pushed her thoughts aside. Maybe she was onto something important in this whole affair, but Gotham was still in danger and they couldn't leave the city's people helpless. Thank you, Commissioner Gordon. Thank you for your help, Batgirl. Robin. Jim fell into disbelief as the two vigilantes left the rooftop. The commissioner remained silent, pondering, trying to figure out what had happened to the old Batman, who the new one was, and why he wasn't working with Robin and Batgirl, the Dark Knight's most well-known allies. The echoing footsteps made Jim turn, his hand going straight to his pistol holster. Blue eyes remained fixed on him, impassive throughout. You again, the man's hand paused. His fingers briefly brushed the grip of the weapon. Aren't you too closely associated with Batman's allies? Not currently. The new Batman appeared before Jim Gordon as he had the first time they met, but Jim found something new. That suit had become darker, more sinister, like that of a true Dark Knight and member of the Night. Blackgate is in a compromising situation. I heard everything. Jim felt a slight chill. This wasn't the Batman he knew, that was becoming increasingly certain. Batgirl and Robin can handle a riot. I'm here for another pressing matter. The Gotham Police Department. Or rather, one of your guys. Roy McCallan. He's been selling information to one of their main enemies, one of the most notorious criminal figures. Black Mask. He could be behind the mob war and arms trafficking in Gotham. Black Mask was a notorious criminal, one of the old Batman's recurring enemies, and a man who craved recognition and power in general. Every time he appeared in Gotham, the criminal attempted to seize absolute control by overthrowing each and every one of his rivals, making enemies in the figures of other Gotham criminals. The same person who had sent Falcone to jail by leaving sensitive information on his own system had sent him data related to the police sergeant and Black Mask's right-hand man, establishing an under-the-table relationship between the police officer and one of the city's most dangerous criminals. Alfred had not yet deduced who was behind all the data, and Naruto only decided to trust the information when he saw something strange in the reports. A bat, the symbol of the Bat family and of Batman himself, which could be an indication of an ally, something that Naruto observed with skepticism. Roy. Sergeant Roy McCallahan had an impeccable record within the Gotham police force. Since passing the academy in the top 3, young Roy had risen rapidly to the rank of sergeant, maintaining a spotless record. All those arrests. All those warrants. A folder slammed into the commissioner's chest, forcing him to move his hands and hold the folder. Your boy is nothing but a lie. Roy has provided Black Mask's allies inside Blackgate with what they needed, and it had all been through arrests. Every criminal Roy caught was another raise on the under-the-table pay Black gave him. Roy had generated an arrest rate of 75%, which was unusually high within Gotham City, given that he was the most successful young man in the police force. But as those records showed, each arrest had been a show that increased traffic within the prison, boosting the young officer's salary and funds, making him one of the highest-paid young men in Gotham City. All that glitters is not gold, Commissioner Gordon. Even among the most beautiful apples, there are some that have rot inside that isn't visible unless you dig a little. Jim looked down. If he wanted to clean up the department, he'd have to investigate every single officer on the job, even those who were on his side. Chapter 4. The Gotham Police Department network stretched across the entire city, from North Gotham to South Gotham, a vast expanse for a single man to control with an entire police force. In each district, there were several police stations that Commissioner Gordon used as strategic points to move his officers in response to any possible or imminent danger, always ready to keep the city's population safe. Jim couldn't maintain control over all locations at the same time or keep track of all his men, no matter how hard he tried in the past. With the help of the old Batman, the commissioner had managed to establish a certain trust with his own subordinates over the years and the constant fight against crime, trust that had been shattered when the new Batman threw that file at him on one of his men. One that Jim had pinned his hopes on, and it seemed to have crumbled like a sandcastle. Gotham had always been rife with corruption. From judges and police officers to politicians and prominent businessmen. Organized crime ruled the city and was present in many of the decisions the mayor's office made for the betterment of the city. They were also responsible for the police failing to fully perform their jobs, something Jim believed he had eliminated from Gotham, restoring some of the public's trust in the police force. A network of corrupt cops had established itself within the department, and Roy seemed, according to the new Batman, to be the linchpin of all the cops who sided with the mob and the small, rising groups of the new gangsters. Some of the files appeared to have been handed over to Mario Falcone before his arrest, but the most recent one was linked to Black Mask, the man no one had seen for a couple of years. Black Mask was a villain, a criminal, and a mafia boss. During his reign, he kept judges and police officers on his peril. With the fall of Carmine Falcone and the old glories of the golden age of organized crime, his empire only grew in number, profits, and territory. He remained a king of crime for quite some time, keeping in check the mafia families who were now claiming their right to Mario Falcone's territories. During Black Mask's empire, the mafia families did not have much control over Gotham, hiding their actions under the movements of Black Mask's men for fear of being the criminal's target. Jim lived through that time of Gotham's darkest and most criminal era. Cops, colleagues, and friends were constantly threatened, controlled by the man behind the black mask, mere puppets he manipulated for convenience and pleasure, his tools for a purpose and mere names on a long list of people he paid for information. That empire crumbled 5 or 6 years earlier, thanks to the previous Batman and his companions. The Gotham vigilante actively fought Black Mask's men, the smuggling gang, and the crime kingpin's allies without a single apparent break. Thanks to his efforts and long hours, Batman won victory over Black Mask and brought down his entire empire, wiping it off the face of the earth, leaving not even a memory of its existence. After that, Black Mask simply disappeared, leaving a gap of 2 years since his last location was known, thanks to a report from the Dark Knight himself, who had chased the criminal out of Gotham. And now that same man was back. Jim stared at the crumpled papers he held in his right hand, feeling helpless and angry. There he had the proof. There he had the confirmation of his most unwanted nightmare. Black Mask's return would only bring chaos and corruption to an unstable Gotham, a city in need of peace. That only added to the current incidents. The constant movement of the mafia, the Blackgate riots, the presence of the Chinese triad, the death of Bruce Wayne. Jim had hoped a situation like this wouldn't happen again. But he had been naive. Although the previous Batman had established a measure of peace by slightly lowering the city's crime rate, his disappearance, along with the deaths of the last of the Waynes, only brought hell down on the city, taking good people along with it and leaving families devastated and people in a worse state than they had ever been. I just hope he doesn't come back, that Black doesn't come across as an opportunistic son of a bitch. Commissioner Gordon rapped on the door in front of him again, waiting for a response, a sound on the other side. He was wearing his oversized trench coat and the hat that slightly covered his face, like some kind of detective. It seems he's not there. Richard John Dick Grayson was accompanying the commissioner wearing casual clothes, but displaying the Bloodhaven police badge on his waistband, shining with a badge number that identified him as a collaborating officer. Gotham wasn't the only city to see a rise in crime. Bloodhaven had seen organized crime increase on its streets thanks to arms smuggling, human trafficking, and the movement of drugs, which completely dismantled the police department. That was the main reason Dick stayed in Gotham, in addition to finding Bruce's killer. His boss had made him a sort of liaison with the Gotham police due to the location of the main export of weapons and drugs to Bloodhaven. Somewhere in Gotham itself. Police corruption and reports linking Roy to Black Mask could be linked to all the trafficking to the neighboring city, and they might find the boss behind this massive operation. However, both Dick and Jim hoped it wasn't really Black Mask, as that would bring an era of terror to Bloodhaven it wasn't ready for. Let's go in. Without a warrant. Jim's eyes darkened. We're in Gotham, kid. I think justice is too slow these days. Bruce Wayne's pupil understood the last sentence Commissioner Gordon said, so he took several steps back and allowed the man to open the apartment door by lightly forcing the lock. When the front door was left open, an Ocher scent hit the olfactory sense of both men, forcing them to lightly cover their noses with their forearms or with part of their jacket. The smell was strong, so much so that Dick's eyes slightly filled with tears. How could we not have smelled this? There's a towel there, they just used it to cover the small gap in the door. They wanted no one to smell it. But didn't it leak in somewhere else? A vent, perhaps. This is strange. Jim entered first, followed by Dick. Both had their service weapons drawn and kept their nostrils completely covered, although the younger man wished he could use a mask to cover his nose. Open the windows, Dick. I'm going to check the living room and the bedrooms. The light barely filtered through the cracks in the blinds. The entire apartment was dark, plunged into the deepest gloom, forcing both men to turn on their flashlights to make progress. The strange thing about it was that it was sunny outside. It was midday. Stumbling over some magazines and what appeared to be a kitchen island, Dick finally made it to the nearest window. He grabbed the cord of the blind and yanked it open with a rude jerk. The rattling only lasted a few seconds, and the light forced the young man to squint for several seconds due to the sudden change in lighting. Roy's kitchen was in disarray, and that was the first thing he noticed. Several bags were still on the counter, with dirty water running over the edge and soaking the floor, causing a strange smell that joined the main one. Rotten, thawed meat. He didn't even put it in the fridge, and judging by the date, he must have bought it a few days ago. The refrigerator was empty, with no trace of food or drink. A pile of dirty dishes over the sink had germinated into a colony of flies, so Dick opened the window wide to relieve some of the pressure of the agglomeration of odors. That house seemed to have been abandoned in haste, but for some urgent reason. Roy didn't seem to have wanted to leave the house, much less the city, which was what his wasted purchases indicated. Maybe he was messy, but Dick doubted the sergeant would be careless enough to breed a colony of insects in his sink by keeping dirty water and rotten food out of the refrigerator. Not even he had gone that far, and he was certainly forgetful. She examined the living room, but didn't find Jim. Adult magazines were scattered across the carpet, and several drawers were out of place, giving the impression of a burglary or Roy's hasty departure. Could something have scared him? A threat? Until yesterday, Sergeant Roy McCallan had been on duty for the Gotham Police Department, clocking out at 10 p.m. as he had every day before. It wasn't until early yesterday morning that Commissioner Gordon obtained evidence of the sergeant's involvement with Black Mask. The meat has been out for several days. This mess in the kitchen isn't from last night, but from weeks ago. Did Roy live like this until his disappearance last night? Or his departure? Dick. Come to the main room. Jim's urgent voice brought the young man out of his train of thought. He set aside one of the books scattered on the carpet and walked toward the commissioner's voice. Have you found something, Jim? Dick's voice gradually grew softer until it finally fell silent. His dark eyes scanned the crime scene, the very scene Jim was analyzing, and the reason he'd called him into the room. Roy's master bedroom was completely empty. Someone had gotten rid of every piece of furniture, except the armor, so they could crucify the sergeant on the wall, nailing his hands directly to it using 2 wooden stakes, smashing his face with what looked like animal claws, and stabbing the man directly through the heart, creating a pool of blood beneath his feet that had since dried, indicating how long the sergeant had lain there, dead. The man's skin had turned white and purple and had begun to rot from being removed from a stable, non-decomposing location. Flies began to swarm around the sergeant's body and parasites had begun to sprout from him. He's been crucified for weeks. How is it possible that he was working yesterday? Neither of them came to an immediate conclusion. Jim because of the shock of seeing Roy McCallaghan crucified in his own house, dead for weeks, and Dick because he kept his eyes on the man's face, searching for something that would make him see who Roy's real killer had been, without reaching a conclusion. We should call forensics, seal off the place completely until they arrive. Jim turned to Dick. Did you find anything in the living room or kitchen? Nothing concrete, just clues as to the possible date of the murder. There's rotten meat, dirty water, unwashed dishes. Maybe with some chemical or something we can decipher how long they've been there, or with a ticket we can find out the sergeant's last purchase. We'll have to check the victim's clothing, her jackets. The ticket probably remains in one of them, or in some of her pants in her closet, or inside her shopping bags. If he made it in the frozen food store, it'll be ruined, Jim. Then we'll check the place where he used to shop. We'll get the last date and also look at the fingerprints of the person who's been posing as Roy the last few days. Jim had tucked the sheets into one of his trench coat pockets. Was it possible that Roy wasn't an employee of Black Mask, but rather the person impersonating him? Commissioner Gordon's mind tried to believe that and search for an explanation that would still give him a little hope for the police department. But they were in Gotham, and everything that seemed normal turned out to be something strange, like that murder. I've seen this before. Memories of another murder many years earlier came flooding back to Jim Gordon. The man was also crucified, but this time on a smashed table, bearing the same wounds as Roy. What's going on? Wayne Industries. The Gotham redevelopment plan established by Bruce Wayne before his death was the project that the new owner of Wayne Industries was committed to implementing, as his predecessor had hoped, something that many people welcomed, especially those who didn't have the resources to be in the best parts of Gotham, risking their lives with each passing day. But it wasn't a project the company could accomplish in a short period of time. They needed the resources, workers, and permits, making this a project that would take at least 10 years from the start date, not the planning date. Bruce Wayne had obtained almost everything on the list, keeping it for his successor if he were to die, as had happened, but permits from Gotham City Hall had been delayed or denied outright, leading to a stalemate that prevented Wayne Industries from moving forward with improvements to the city, with the changes that many of its residents needed. Naruto wasn't too happy about not being able to continue Bruce's plans, something Alfred noticed by looking into his eyes every time the boy saw the mayor's face on television or in a newspaper photo. The man was being bribed, blackmailed, or bought off to prevent Wayne Industries from continuing with its improvement plans, and it was something any sensible person could see. But that situation could change. In 6 months, Gotham's mayoral elections would take place, as they do every 4 years, giving the opportunity for another person to take over the mayor's position. A woman had been the candidate to challenge the current mayor at the polls and seemed to have the necessary strength to unseat her rival in the elections, something the mayor surely didn't like too much, as all her dirty laundry could be exposed and the candidate was eager to support the Wayne Industries project, making it clear that she would give it the green light once she took office as Gotham's mayor. Mr. Bruce also got frustrated when things didn't go his way. I think you inherited that from him, Mr. Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki was the current CEO of Wayne Industries and also the owner of the company, so any action he took would reflect on his own company, everything he did as CEO, and any changes he wanted to make to Gotham. His name was still printed in the newspapers, even though it had been a month since he took over the company. Any new resident of Gotham was hounded by the press for months, from what he could tell. Sorry Alfred. I'm a little frustrated. And like Bruce, he's exercising. The office that had once belonged to Bruce Wayne now belonged to Naruto. It hadn't been remodeled or changed in the slightest, not even when Lucius Fox took over as CEO of the company. It remained exactly as Bruce had left it, and Naruto was allowed to use the exercise machines in the room, also he could take his mind off Gotham's problems, of which there were many. Have you found out anything about our informant, Alfred? The person who tipped him off and created the evidence on Mario Falcone had also been the one in charge of giving him the evidence on Roy McCallaghan to provide to Jim Gordon, uncovering Black Mask's presence in arms trafficking and the movement of narcotics between Gotham and Bloodhaven. The last IP was from Albania, and since then, he's been around the globe. I'd say that after sending his report, he simply moves to another country within a few hours. Although the information about Black Mask's involvement, Maroni's movements, and the Triad's presence are matters worth taking into account. His ally had continued sending files on other Gotham police officers, judges, and individuals who were actively collaborating with the Gotham underworld mafia, providing their illegal bosses with information on police patrols and movements in each of Gotham's boroughs. It doesn't seem to stay in one place for long. It moves on once it's released the information and moves to another point on the continent, maybe even the world. We've been monitoring its movements recently. We can look for a pattern. Naruto stopped his reverse push-ups and looked directly at Alfred. He'd already thought about looking for a pattern in his friend's movements, trying to find a connection between the countries he traveled through, searching for identity. I see, he fell to his feet. We can use Wayne Industries satellites to triangulate their position. Once we have that, I can go and take over the meeting. That would be sir, come see this. Naruto frowned as Alfred's voice sounded somewhat agitated and muffled. He wiped his face with a towel and walked over to the desk. What is it that you… On the laptop screen, on the monitor to which it was connected, a live video was playing. It showed Batgirl tied to a chair, blood dripping from her bruised and damaged face, her costume slightly cut. Surprisingly, the girl was still wearing her mask. Alfred? Mister? Get my suit ready. Chapter 5. Thick high walls surrounded an immense courtyard, which was further divided into different sections, each separated by a new wall, which was governed by a thick watchtower, from which guards kept an eye on the prisoners inside the penitentiary. Thick iron gates had for years prevented criminals from escaping their punishment, preventing anyone unwanted from entering one of Gotham's most unpopular places. Blackgate Penitentiary boasts the finest security systems, with the most fortified building that could even repel an entry attack, an enemy assault. It's Gotham's main prison where the biggest criminals have a cell with their names engraved on it, waiting for them again. Few criminals have managed to escape from Blackgate or even thought about it. Once a criminal steps foot on the prison floor, they never see the light of day again unless a true catastrophe shakes the prison. The prison had recently become overcrowded. Each cell at Blackgate had been occupied by 3 or 4 inmates when the capacity was only 2 people per cell, with the number of prisoners exceeding the number of guards serving the prison warden by 3. A prison that had ceased to be safe and had become a veritable nest of vipers. Nobody knew how it started, how it all began. The sun had been shining brightly over the prison that morning, sending its warm embrace over the prisoners and guards as they went about their daily routines before heading back inside Blackgate. The prisoners themselves had remained relaxed, calm, and hadn't caused any disturbances throughout the day until they were locked in their cells after lunch, something that had caught the attention of some of the more senior guards. Those who had a strange feeling about the day were somewhat right. During the changing of the guard, a fire began to devour one of the cells that had been occupied by one of Black Mask's men, one of his most loyal followers to this day, where he left the world of the living scorched until his skin, eyes, and hair were completely burned away, leaving them black as coal. The fire in cell 567 quickly forced guards to attempt an evacuation of their fellow inmates and prisoners in the adjacent cells, while simultaneously attempting to extinguish the blaze and calm everyone involved, but without real success. The situation only worsened, and the inmates released for transfer to another cell began a battle with the guards, effectively putting aside the fire that had started in a strange manner, leaving several charred and unrecognizable corpses. As the minutes passed, more and more prisoners were escaping from their cells, and soon the Blackgate guards were outnumbered, being knocked down and restrained by the prisoners they were meant to hold captive. By late afternoon, Blackgate had ceased to belong to the warden and his guards and was now in the hands of the prisoners. Without a clear leader, there was a chance they could be overthrown within the hour by organized groups. However, the leader of the criminals organized them and took complete control of the prison security system, creating an impregnable fortress that no one could take by direct assault without his knowledge. And finally, the Blackgate leader's efforts paid off when Robin and Batgirl fell into his trap, both being held in the prison yard, both restrained with strong ropes that kept them completely still in their chairs, being focused on by cameras and powerful spotlights that blinded them. Robin showed minor injuries, tears in his uniform and a bruise just above his right cheekbone, with blood running down his chin due to a strong direct blow that left a knuckle mark on his injured face. Batgirl was feeling slightly worse than Robin. During the confrontation with the criminals, Robin had been directly knocked out by a crushing blow. Instead, she found herself fighting on her own, crawling until she was sent to Dreamland, the taste of blood in her mouth. Finally they both wake up. The first thing Batman's two sidekicks saw was a skull staring back at them, a dark hood covering most of its head. Robin noticed the tattered black cape that accompanied the hood and the scythes protruding from its arms, both of which were connected to the skull by its reddish armor. "You." The criminal's laughter, hollowed out by the metallic skull, reached the ears of both vigilantes. "It's been a long time since we've seen each other, Batgirl and Robin. Apparently, Batman chooses a different Robin every few years, right? Though that's over, I'm afraid. With his death, we're free. You organized all this? All this chaos? You could say so. Don't you take me for a clever one, Miss Batgirl. I'm afraid you're in no position to insult me. With the dark night down and the police failing to act, it's time for the Blackgate inmates to flood the streets of Gotham." The cry was echoed by every inmate in the corridor and on the catwalks, all with their attention completely fixed on the figures of the two vigilantes, two of the aides of the man who had sent them there in the first place, and something they were determined to correct now that they had the chance. Some were even waiting for the moment to take revenge on Robin and Batgirl. "I only kept you here out of courtesy." Letting these degenerates, the criminal swung his right arm in a 300-degree turn, finally pointing it at Batgirl, and Robin again. "Enjoy their fun before you even woke up didn't seem fair to me. You have the right to see what will befall you, what will bring your death to Gotham. Hope shines in the most unlikely places." Gotham found that hope in Batman, and it extended to his teammates, friends, and allies. "I'm not an idiot who thinks Gotham is lost. Not unless all the vigilantes are 6 feet under. And killing the Bat family is the best way to erase hope from the city, to drown it once again in its rot. Reaper. Reaper." The criminal Benjamin Gruner aka Reaper had been one of the Dark Knight's enemies, one of the villains Batman had to stop when he was a vigilante. After his presumed death on the Gotham raft, Reaper had been following his own agenda until Batman locked him up in Blackgate, along with the rest of the criminals, being another villain that the Bat had locked up there. And now he had taken the opportunity to take over Blackgate with the intention of escaping from it and causing chaos throughout the city, flooding Gotham with corpses. What's happening? There's a heavy police force on the bridge connecting Blackgate to Gotham. We're not going to be able to get through. The only way to get from Gotham to Blackgate was via a bridge that connected the city to the prison island, and it was also one of the 2 escape points criminals would have to use. The other would be the rough sea itself, but without a suitable vessel, few of them could escape the place unharmed. "You don't have to worry too much, Tommy. I don't think you're going to be able to escape anyway." "What? Why?" Batgirl closed her eyes as the warm touch of blood ran over her body, leaving her stunned. When she opened them, she saw Tommy lying dead at her feet, blood soaking his yellow boots and turning them slightly orange. "I hate it when someone truly has no patience," Reaper sighed and turned his attention back to the vigilantes. "Commissioner Gordon is trying to stop something that's out of his hands. He doesn't even have enough loyal men to stop or pursue anyone else. Without Batman, Gotham belongs to criminals. And I'm going to make my way into the big leagues." "The major leagues, huh? What are those leagues?" "The Penguin. Black Mask. Maroni or Falcone. They all eventually fell in their time, Gruner. You can't get something for the top leagues if they've all been defeated. And you weren't even selected by those leagues to do any work. They don't take you into account." Robin gritted his teeth as he witnessed the blow Batgirl received after those words. Flustered, Reaper shook his head and lowered his arm, letting blood drip from his right side onto the cold prison floor. "You shouldn't be so self-centered, Batgirl. You're tied up. You're at our mercy. And believe me, I'm not going to let you get out of this prison on your own." The Bat family had protected Gotham for years, ever since its formation by Batman himself. The Dark Knight had taken in various orphans and trained them as his Robins, giving birth to Nightwing, Batgirl, and the current Robin, along with others who helped them fight crime on the streets of Gotham. If the vigilante group were completely eliminated, the last traces of light would disappear from the city, turning it completely dark, much colder than it had been before. "It's time for the show to begin," Reaper stood between the two vigilantes. "People of Gotham. The news of the Dark Knight's death has recently hit the city. A month. 30 days. And not even his companions are able to protect you from what's coming from what has already begun in the city. Gang wars. Gun and drug trafficking. Different factions had risen up in Gotham and divided the city among themselves like slices of a pie. Reaper and the inmates wanted a piece of that city that didn't have its usual protector and whose helpers weren't up to the task. Batgirl. Robin. Say something to the viewers. They're expecting you to save them. The laughter came in seconds. Cruel and lacerating, the criminals imprisoned in Blackgate didn't hold back in their mockery of the vigilantes and the people of Gotham. They would finally leave the prison, and behind them would be the corpses of the vigilantes' colleagues they hated so much. We'll dance on your graves, boys. The flashbulbs exploded into hundreds of pieces of glass and sparks, forcing nearby prisoners to move away, protecting themselves from the shower of glass. An intense light shone on Reaper. That is. Lebantanov. In a whisper, the ridiculous name came from the vigilante's lips. That ship was Batman's flagship. Not even she or Nightwing had used it since Bruce's death, and she doubted Dick had decided to use Batman's ship to raid the prison. But the poop, several smoke grenades covered the entire courtyard. Reaper stood next to Batgirl and Robin, scanning the smoke-blackened darkness and the faint light the Batship began to project. It was only shining on him and Batman's companions. Moans, gunshots, and grunts began to be heard. The echo of bodies falling to the ground served as a backdrop for the falling smoke and the echo of heavy, resonant footsteps that filled Reaper's head. Who are you? Batgirl's eyes widened at the same time as Robin's. In front of the two vigilantes and the criminal, a dark figure appeared, wrapped in a dark cloak and armor that only left two blue orbs like two enormous sapphires visible. So you weren't dead, Batman. The new Batman made his appearance. Shrouded in darkness, illuminated by the Batship spotlight, the Dark Knight of Gotham City was visible to all the inhabitants of the cold, dark city. The rain had resumed its activities, and the cameras focused on the missing vigilante. As quiet as ever. Mysterious, dark, and the Night Reaper laughed dryly. You should have stayed in that rotten hole you crawled out of to visit me. Though, should I feel honored? You don't even look like the same Batman you always did. Shorter, less broad, less intimidating. Even though you cloak yourself in darkness, I can see your body isn't the same. Did the old man die, giving way to another Batman? That would be truly fun. It was swift. The new Batman went from being in the spotlight to standing in front of the villain, swinging his right arm in the process. Blue eyes flashed. A clenched jaw strained the mask around the man's head. Outpacing the criminal's arm speed, the Dark Knight delivered a jab that echoed through Blackgate courtyard like a bell had been struck. You're the first idiot, Batman, then. The metal of the armor gleamed in the ship's spotlight. Punch directly with a fist covered only by a glove. That's something not even a kid would do. The criminal's armor provided Benjamin Gruner with a substantial enhancement to his physical abilities, as well as defenses almost insurmountable for the average person. Someone with super strength like Superman or Wonder Woman could easily overcome it. But someone with the strength of a normal human. It was well known that Batman was the pinnacle of human strength without powers, drugs, or serums. But Batman had never broken a suit of armor with a simple punch or ripped metal from an opponent's body. I never said my fist was alone, Benjamin Gruner Aka Reaper. The eyes beneath the cold helmet opened wide. Benjamin's ears began to pick up a faint ringing that slowly grew louder, sharper, and more intense, to the point of becoming completely unbearable. What have you done? Batman jumped back, creating space between himself and the criminal, preventing the scythe from grazing his skin. I just jammed something into the gaps in that armor. You were so focused on showing off your greatness in front of the cameras that you didn't even consider the possibilities you were giving me just by standing there, looking at me, laughing. Batman always had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and possibly the entire alphabet to stop one of his targets. That had always been the essential method of the old Batman, of Bruce Wayne, when he hid his face under the bat mask, and that drove him to unimaginable levels of paranoia and distrust. Naruto became a different Batman. He wasn't Bruce, and he didn't have Bruce's intellect. All he had from the previous Batman was his fortune, his gadgets, and his suit, which he was improving with Wayne Industries technology. What have you done, you bucking bat? Batman raised a controller. Introducing a sonic bomb through one of the gaps in the armor probably wasn't the best plan, but it was the most effective way to stop you if you were wearing that helmet. If Benjamin Gruner had known this earlier, he might have tried to stop Batman's hand from exploding right inside his suit. But he had discovered the blow too late. Late enough for the new Batman to press the red button on the dark remote, and the sound soon filled his eardrums, resembling a constant gong inside his head. Desperate, Benjamin pulled back the skull helmet, revealing his agonized face, his eyes shining with despair and pain as he looked at the figure of Batman standing in front of him, pressing the button, with the antenna of the remote pointing directly at him. Help. The new Batman could have enjoyed the criminal's suffering a little more, reveling in the pitiful cries of the battered man who looked at him with the eyes of a scared puppy. But even though he would have liked to, he decided not to become dependent on the suffering of others and knocked the criminal out with a direct blow to the jaw, sending him flat on his back completely unconscious, his eyes rolling back into the dark prison sky. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.